All right, it's been a wild 3 weeks in AI since sort of the end of December. There were a lot of announcements, and I think they got lost in the holidays. I think these should have been front page news probably ever since they were announced, but that's just my opinion. So I thought I'd share my perspective on some of these. Most of the people here have probably already seen one, many, or all of these announcements and updates from various companies. But I thought I'd share my perspective real quick. This is kind of the AI update that nobody asked for. So here you go. The landscape of this whole AI arena is, it kind of takes, you have to build a mental map of what's happening, who's bringing the new toys to play with. And so one way to think about it is there's companies, organizations, and individuals who are the creators. There are some individuals making incredibly significant contributions to the space. You have your models, which sort of drive everything. 2025 is, I do agree with all the hype that it is going to be about agents, giving these models tasks to complete uh, where they are empowered to take actions independently. And then all of these, the interface to all of the models and agents is through tools. So that's kind of the place where we interact with these technologies. I finished recording this whole presentation last night, but of course the audio didn't work for some reason. So maybe in 2025, audio will finally work correctly. Probably not, though. So let's talk about O3. This is the latest model from OpenAI, which was announced towards the end of December. And the reason that this is bananas and mind blowing is because it is achieving benchmark scores that are on artificial general intelligence levels. So one definition of that is doing things as well or better than most humans. Not everything, but enough things to make serious note of, and we'll look at those briefly. The one thing to note too, though, is that this is not going to upend everything tomorrow. For one thing, it's not out yet, or at least available to the public because they're trying to sort of make sure it's safe-ish to use. But the other thing, perhaps even more importantly, is that it's way too expensive to use. Some of the calls or the questions cost $1,000 to $2,000 to answer per query. So if you saw the presentation from OpenAI, you would have seen this slide, which is demonstrating the score here, which is 87.5% on this test, which is geared specifically at measuring artificial general intelligence. Now, if you look at the questions on this test for humans, they're actually pretty easy to get quickly, but they're sort of meant to trip up AI and the way AI thinks. As you can see, like all the latest models up until November didn't score very highly on this, but this new model can score quite high. Again, answering each of these questions costs $1,000 to $2,000, and a 10-year-old could probably solve a lot of these problems just as quickly. But it is sort of another measure of specifically like general intelligence. This is another super impressive benchmark. So O3 scored 175th on this elite coding competition, putting it, I think, somewhere in the upper 99th percentile of all software developers. A rank of 175th on this coding competition is pretty mind blowing, actually, meaning it is the 175th best software developer of millions, I don't know how many software developers there are, but of, let's say, a few million, it's basically one of the top 100, top 200. This is a math competition of elite mathematicians and math students. And this is representative of all expert topic areas. So PhD level students have various tests to demonstrate their knowledge, or PhD candidates, and OpenAI O3 is consistently scoring at the top end of amongst PhD candidates. This particular chart is showing this robot. I inserted it. It's meant to represent, I should have written down, it scored a 96 on this elite math competition. The top score is, I'm not sure, 150, I think. But as you can see, the top 5% of students scored 112, but the median and mean are down in the 50s and 60s. So this is an area where AI has struggled in the past, but O3 is demonstrating that it is a highly capable mathematician, essentially. So let's move on to the next topic, another thing that blew my mind, which is DeepSeek. So this is an advanced model from China, a Chinese company that I think is also called DeepSeek. It's achieving benchmarks that are equivalent to the best models that we have available to the general populace today. So not really talking about that O3 model, but apart from that, it's super impressive. It's open source, unlike obviously Claude Sonnet or anything from OpenAI. OpenAI is such a caveat. It's super fast and super cheap. And possibly the most amazing thing about this model is, whereas some of these other models are costing hundreds of millions of dollars, or in the case of Llama 3, probably $1 billion to train, they were able to do it for only $5 million, and with hardware that is the most advanced NVIDIA chips are restricted from being sold to China. So they're doing it with sort of, I don't know if you'd say outdated hardware, but definitely underpowered hardware relative to what the rest of these companies have access to. So just a mind-boggling achievement from them. One thing to note, if you do use DeepSeek, which I am on my personal sort of containerized systems, DeepSeek is, if you're using their hosted model, it is out of China. So you should assume that everything you write can be looked at by the Chinese government, and maybe is. However, since it's an open source model, anyone can run this thing. Now, it does take a lot of horsepower. It is a huge model, but there are a couple of companies already in the U.S. that are hosting it that you can access. So the cost is a little bit higher, but it's still, I think, cheaper than any of the other models. So I just wanted to demystify DeepSeek a little bit. This is their home screen. If you just type in, I think, deepseek.com or Google it or whatever. So if you click here, it takes you to a ChatGPT-like interface. You can talk to it, or if you want an API key, you just click here. And so these are those two screens. So as you can see, just a standard chat interface. It can do RAG searches, or it can think more deeply about problems. I forget what that sort of algorithm is called, but it takes longer to answer questions, but does so in more depth. This is their API interface. So again, super standard. I have used DeepSeek a lot over several days, and it's almost impossible to actually spend money against it. So I used it for, I guess does it show in here somewhere the number of tokens? So 3,800,000 tokens I think I've used, and I was only able to burn through 17 cents so far. You could use it, I think, nonstop for a month and probably not even spend $2. So again, super cheap, super impressive. Now let's look at their benchmarks a little bit. This is a screenshot from the DeepSeek site itself, but I don't have any reason to doubt these numbers. So as you can see in the arena of English, it's very competitive. It's competitive in sort of every category. Most importantly, to me personally and software developers, is how well it does in the coding benchmarks. So up until now, Claude Sonnet has kind of been held as the gold standard. That is what IDEs such as Windsurf and Cursor are using for their primary sort of their most complex queries. But as you can see, DeepSeek outperforms every other available model except Claude Sonnet in a couple cases. But that's, what, five, six out of eight benchmarks. And it's competitive in these as well, of course. And in math, it seems to be performing better than almost any available model. I guess the O1 model is not listed here, which is a little bit more advanced, but it's also expensive and slow. DeepSeek is super fast. This is just a screenshot of where I have it set up in VS Code. The agent technology is Cline. Cline 3 came out again in December, so this is another thing that blew my mind. This is a free open source agent from, I think, an individual developer, which is on par or better than the agents available in Windsurf and Cursor. I've used all three, not super extensively, but Cline, it seems to be better. But here's the thing, is that with those other commercial IDEs, they don't pivot as fast because they're not open source. Cline is open source. So I couldn't use DeepSeek with those other agents to try it out, to try out DeepSeek and how it performed. DeepSeek does perform better than Claude Sonnet. It's faster, it's cheaper, and as far as I can tell, the answers are at least as good or more capable. So am I going to talk more about that? Maybe. I can't remember in this presentation. Anyway, the interface here is not so much DeepSeek as it is VS Code and Cline 3. So let's talk more about those agents. So there's kind of, and by the way, this whole presentation is probably going to be out of date in a week or two, if it's not already, just because of how fast things are moving. But let's talk about agents briefly, specifically software coding agents. So there's kind of three main options right now. There's VS Code, which we were just looking at. Well, the IDEs, there's Windsurf, Cursor, and VS Code. And then each of those have an agent technology. So the reason Windsurf is noteworthy is because it came out with Cascade, which was really the first capable coding agent. There had been news in 2024 of things like Devin, but Devin was a scam, honestly. So Cascade is real though, and it was the first one. Then Cursor came along with their agent, which is Composer. And then Cline itself, I don't know how long it's been around, but Cline 3 is a huge update that came out in December. And immediately somebody said, I want to use DeepSeek. So I don't know if it was the original developer, it probably was, but very quickly they added support for DeepSeek, which with these other IDEs, at least the last time I checked, like a week ago, you couldn't specify DeepSeek as a model, which is that's a problem. Like, they need to solve that. Of course, IntelliJ is a great IDE as well, but again, they've been behind on updating their ability to use the latest models, to the best of my knowledge. Let's talk about NotebookLM from Google real briefly. Now, this has been around a while, and the reason it's noteworthy, Google is catching up with Gemini capabilities on their model. Like, they haven't been. It's been a very ironic story because Google sort of developed the basis for all modern AI and published papers that OpenAI ran with to sort of create their first version of ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever. Anyway, Google is catching up, and more importantly, they are coming out with some tools that are really innovative, like NotebookLM, which, independent of the model, is. Oh, hey Google, stop. That's not such a smart Google technology. Anyway, I gotta be careful what I say, I guess, talking about Google, since it's always listening. NotebookLM allows you to upload multiple documents to create kind of a knowledge base that you can then interact with and talk to in various ways. I'm not aware of anything else quite like this, because you can upload one or multiple documents to, say, ChatGPT, but there is, you hit a limit pretty quickly with it tokenizes those documents. With the professional version now of Gemini, I read a couple days ago, you can upload up to 300 documents, which is a reasonably large sort of knowledge base there you're building up. And then I think it was either in November or December, they came out with this interesting feature where you can click to generate a podcast from what you have uploaded, and it's astounding. It's you can't really tell the difference from human commentators. In fact, I played for my extended family a podcast that they didn't know wasn't real until I told them, basically. And as an example of just some random thing you can do with this, I've been playing this game with some friends that is kind of like Minecraft for Vikings, but we had an extensive chat history about the game. So I uploaded that chat history and then had it generate a podcast about our adventures. And it was hilarious, talking about the various things that we were working on, working towards, our challenges, our adventures, everything. So anyway, it's a super enjoyable and free technology to use. So I wanted to mention a few my predictions for 2025. Like I said, I am sold on the fact that agents are where 2025 is going to be at. But I think this can be boiled down to kind of a simple metric of progress. And essentially, what I'm saying here is that today, what I've seen is agents. Let's speaking specifically of these software coding agents. If you give it a task of moderate complexity, it solves it some amount of the time. Whether that's 40%, 60%, 70% of the time, but some percent of time. So that percent is X. And as 2025 progresses, agents are going to be able to solve those tasks of moderate complexity a higher and higher percent of time, probably each month, but it won't be, it won't be a steady line of progress. It will be sort of these exponential leaps in progress. And people are working on creating sort of these swarms of agents that work together, but from the end user standpoint, that is sort of irrelevant, I think, because that will happen behind the scenes, and then there will be a single agent which will be managing the rest of those to, again, complete these tasks of moderate complexity. So that is my prediction for 2025. I think that will be all of 2025, and I think as we approach the end of 2025, agents will be able to solve tasks of moderate complexity close to 95% of the time. And what's interesting too is that the difference between being able to solve something 60 and 70% of the time is actually smaller than, say, 92 and 95% of the time, because then you're getting closer and closer to 100% of the time. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for listening. And you'll be able to quickly see how wrong I am in this prediction, but these were things that blew my mind about the last few weeks in AI news. And the other thing too is that these were the most significant 3 weeks in all of AI sort of updates, I believe. And 2025 is going to have a much, much higher percent of sort of these groundbreaking updates than all sort of previous history combined, if you will. So cheers.